Welcome to The Growth Equation. This isn't your typical business podcast. We're keeping it real about the challenges of scaling up, period. I'm Tristan Wright and I've been there. I've built and scaled my own business. I've sold it. I've learned a ton along the way. Now I'm bringing you the no BS stories of founders who are in the trenches right now, navigating that messy middle. We're talking advertising, marketing, design, creative, branding, the whole 9 yards. Doesn't matter if you're a solopreneur or running a team of 100. Everyone's got a secret sauce, that thing that makes them different, better. We're going to uncover it. So grab a coffee and let's get real. Today we're talking to Jason and Brendan. Guys, I'm going to throw it over to you. Tell us a bit about your business, your story.
I might kick off with our origin story. Hey, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely.
I deliberately didn't introduce the business name because it came there's a version 2 effectively as well. So I'll let you guys go into that part.
All right. So let's go way back. So about 2008, 2009, I was working in London for a company called Sign-Up2, an email marketing platform, founded or originated in sort of the post.com boom, 2002, I believe. I sort of run the client success team there, the creative department, and started the professional services arm of the business. Fast forward to 2012, I'd moved back to Brisbane, Australia, and brought the company to Australia. Set up the subsidiary of Sign-Up2 Australia, and implemented the go-to-market strategy for APAC. Hired Jason, and we started building out the team, selling the product as well as selling professional services. A few years later, we had the opportunity to sell the business, and were acquired by what became GoDaddy, which was quite exciting and gave us the opportunity to, rebrand. And that's when we pivoted into an agency called &Zen, which is who we are these days. We focus on marketing automation, email marketing. We had the opportunity to go full agnostic at that point and start working with multiple platforms after the sale. We found our niche, I guess, in e-commerce a few years later. It was very easy to join the dots on attribution and ROI. Became a Klaviyo partner early on, and the rest is history.
Awesome. So where are you today? So you've gone through moving back to Australia, scaling the business in Australia, that getting sold, setting up a new one. I'm sure there's a journey that we'll go through with this business, but what does the business look like headcount-wise, all of that, location-wise today?
Well, headcount, we're sitting at about 20, and I guess we can get into the journey of the highs and lows of that. But yeah, we have a team in Australia. A team in Australia, a team in the Philippines, and a team in the US, and some non-exec and shareholders in the UK as well. So yeah, basically we're spread all around, and we service clients from all over the world. I'd say at this point, it's probably 50-50, with 50% of our clients in Australia, and then the rest predominantly in the US.
Awesome. And Brendan, are both you and Jason business partners now? Like you said, you'd hired Jason in the previous business.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, the journey, because I started out as an employee in the UK. I then became a director when we brought the business to Australia. And then a few years later, Jason also became a director and a shareholder. And we both sort of worked through like a sweat equity and into, I guess, senior and then ultimately director roles. So these days, yeah, Jason and I, both directors, both shareholders, equally responsible for the highs and the lows.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Jason, this would have been a bit of a journey for you, like for both of you, like being the first time that you've set up a business from scratch yourselves. So
Yeah.
tell me a bit of like going from being the implementer or the doer to being the business owner, let's say. What was that transition like?
Yeah, it's interesting, I think, because Brendan, when we launched it as Sign Up 2 in Australia, or at least when I joined the business, basically we were in an office that I think was maybe 2 meters by 2 meters. Initially, there was 3 of us in that office. It was one of those rooms where if you wanted to get up, you had to let everyone else know so they could tuck their chairs right into their desks so that you had enough room to get out. And I think although we had this fairly large, decade-old company behind us in the UK, we were running out of a co-working space. We were working with other startup brands, effectively in a startup incubator, and we thought of ourselves very much as a startup. The way that we actually met is that while I was at university, a friend of mine knew the director of this startup incubator, and I was at university studying PR, and my friend's mother had just mentioned to the director that, her son's friend is studying PR, and the director said, "Oh, that's great, because I actually need someone to come in and do some free, basically, work with these startup businesses and help them put together a press kit and do things like that." So my way into meeting Anzen, but really into professional work after uni, at least after studying what I studied to do this, was going into a startup environment and helping small businesses figure out how to put together a press kit, how to reach out to journalists, how to try and build some hype for their startup. And then, Brennan and I had a great conversation. I met our shareholders in the UK. I think I worked for free for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
And then, with the way that business deals get done in Australia, we went to the pub and I walked out with a job. But I mean, the genesis of the whole thing was where, we're essentially bootstrapping the Australian arm of this business. And I think having that mentality from the beginning was what allowed me to think about this as less of a job and more of a career straight out of uni. I had an opportunity to sit down with a product and think about, and I think Brennan encouraged this as well, think about the bigger picture in all the small things that we do. I started by answering the phones, effectively frontline support for a tech software. And then I started getting these support questions that turned into me suggesting to Brendan, well, why don't we offer a managed service? Because we get so many of these questions that are fairly simple to do. And so we put together a managed service, and then, by taking that initiative, I was then implementing the service, and then I was able to help our sales team sell the service more until we needed more people. And I kind of was able to continuously create those opportunities to prove myself.
But not everybody does that, right?
No.
Like, not everybody thinks about their job as a career. Like, a lot of times they just get focused on the actual role or the actual job. And I think, Jason was one of those rare people, and probably like myself, who saw this as an opportunity for a career, right? And that's how you start answering the phone, or for me, designing websites and pretty pictures, into being responsible for a team.
Yeah. So what does the business look like today in terms of, are you a flat org chart? Are you guys still delivering the work? How does that all look?
We've been through a few different iterations, and I think this sort of depends on where we're at in the business, and certainly for us, the economy. But these days, Jason is actually heading up the sales department, and he's all things revenue and sales, which has actually worked out really well because of his strategic background. And I am running ops these days, as well as sort of overall, growth and PR of the company. Rewind only to a few years ago, and Jason was running ops, and I was doing essentially admin.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So I would have picked you, Brendan, as a creative type, and not necessarily like just the way you're dressed and presenting, not necessarily amazing at ops. So were you originally creative and you've self-taught yourself ops, or?
Pretty much, yeah. So, I started out as a freelance contractor, sort of been running my own business since the age of 18, really. But a lot of that revolved around, as an actual creative delivery. So it was, designing websites, coding, I guess doing some basic IT consulting. I started at Sign Up to actually as a graphic designer, designing emails. But I think I quickly learned that I'm not the most creative person in the world. I'm not the most focused person. But I guess I have a broad set of skills, which makes me like a great manager and an even better business owner to be across 1,000 things, but not deep into them. And it gives me the ability, well, this company gave me the ability to hire experts in the field. Where I actually spend most of my days is in spreadsheets now. Spreadsheets, systems, and processes.
I love it. You said it makes you great at this and great at that. Like the confidence that you have, but without an ego. So there's so many people, business owners, that have either got an ego or say they're good at it, but they're actually not that good, kind of thing. So
I think sometimes, we might have an ego when the context calls for it, but I think broadly or generally we try to, I guess, put our money where our mouth is, and actually like back up what we say. I think ANZ has a really great reputation, not just here in Australia, but globally, for what we do. And it's sort of one of the other points of, we had an opportunity to grow, and a lot of agencies tend to grow by adding services or, growing horizontally. We decided to stay niche, stay dedicated to marketing automation, customer journey, and not go into the world of SEO or PPC or dev. But for us to grow, we had to grow geographically, right? So we made a conscious decision when we got to the crossroads of, do we add more services to grow our revenue, or do we expand geographically? And I feel like we made the right choice, and that sort of helped us expand into the US.
So what year did you guys form this business?
So Sign Up to, we started the company in 2012, and then a few years later we pivoted into ANZ. So yeah, we basically, technically running for about 12, 13 years, but about ANZ, I'd say about 10 years, Jason.
Jason, you're on mute, mate.
Yeah, sorry. Neighbor just took a perfect timing to start drilling holes in his brick walls. So yeah, 10 years is NZen. And then we were I think Sign Up to for 2 to 3 years before that.
Yeah.
And what year did you push into the US market?
Oh, we had impeccable timing. So we had naturally picked a few clients up in the US, more so through our reputation with Klaviyo, which is a platform. We're an elite partner of theirs. And we had been the lucky, I guess, early to the party in APAC, and that allowed us to grow here very quickly and build a really strong reputation with their team, which at the time they only had an office in Boston and everyone was in Boston. So we ended up picking up some US work because, the Americans are great at often just wanting to work with the best and not really necessarily wanting to stay home. So we'd picked up a fair few clients, and we actually went to Klaviyo's conference in 2019, KBOS, and Brennan and I went with the mentality that the American e-commerce market was very advanced. These agencies are going to know all these things that we don't, and we're going to really pick up a bunch of knowledge and bring it back to Australia. And what we found was that a lot of what they were talking about in the US was actually really basic 101 stuff compared to the things that we were doing, and we were really surprised that about what they were talking about. And when we came back and we kind of talked about it a fair bit, what we decided, or our impression at least, was that the Australian market in particular for e-commerce, because we're a strong economy but a small economy, it's highly competitive for merchants. And actually what we had sort of discovered was that to be successful here, you really had to push the envelope strategically. You really had to be great to succeed. And while I'm not saying you don't have to be great to succeed in America, I think, one of the great things about America is that the market is so big. Often the best advice is just do the basics really well, and you can achieve a pretty good amount of success. And so with that kind of confidence, we thought, let's take all of these amazing things that we're doing in APAC and launch in America. And so we, got together all of our the money that we've been squirreling away, and we opened an office in Santa Monica in January of 2020. And we put boots on the ground and we signed an office lease, and we got on a plane at the end of, probably the start of February, and saw people walking around with masks and thought to ourselves, surely this is going to go fine. And it was definitely a stressful experience, but ultimately, as we learned, COVID was actually, one of the best things that could happen to e-commerce.
Yeah, totally. Everyone is moving online and everyone is buying e-commerce. So
yeah,
I remember I was in the Philippines in February of that year, and we were getting our going in and out of the hotels. They were checking our temperatures.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
so in the beginning we weren't convinced what was going to happen, and we were spending lots of meetings like what we could pivot into next, and becoming a food delivery service was one of them. But then the dust settled, and then e-commerce just boomed, and we sort of really took off as an agency.
What was your headcount at in 2019 roughly?
It would have been high 20s.
So similar sort of headcount now to then?
Yeah.
What I'm interested in is, like, as you've grown, let's say from 10 to 20s to high 20s and maybe back a bit, what are some of the pains or the issues that you've felt, and like what's been your favorite size and what's been the hardest size so far?
So I mean, I think being around for such a long time, we had a fairly organic growth trajectory up until I guess 2020. But during COVID, an absolute explosion on e-commerce. So we basically doubled in size, and we were growing at such a rapid rate. Jason and I were hiring 2 or 3 people sort of every month. And it was a very different business. Ops was like the main I guess strategic lever that we had. Sales were coming in no matter what, and Jason and I just had to make sure that we were efficient and that we could recruit as fast as we could sell. So it was like an obscene time in the market, which is very exciting, but also challenging. But I think probably the more challenging period was the very steep cliff that we hit in 2022. Was the sort of global economic downturn, and then the reality back from the COVID highs, and then having clients pull back immediately, and then realizing that you've been scaling at such a rate that you now you have no choice but to put this vehicle in reverse. That's when we had to downsize a bit, to meet the market.
So retrospectively, did you downsize your team fast enough?
Yes, we had some good advice, and we were looking at our forecasts, and we saw what was coming. So we made some really tough decisions early on, and I think the fact that we're having this conversation today means that we managed to survive and get through it. And I knew a few agencies didn't. But yeah, it was a humbling experience. You asked before, like, what is your favorite size? I think right now, actually, back at 20, and then I think that the challenge of growth, whilst profitable and exciting, is that you're bringing people on rather quickly, and maybe you're not making the most strategic decision around hiring because you're moving so quickly. And then I think just the nature of the business at the time means that you have a different workforce and a different company culture. And I feel like the pullback now and some of the slower rehiring decisions we've made, I think we've got a solid team, a solid culture, and it's a bit more of a manageable size. We certainly still have aspirations to continue to grow, But I think sort of going through that period, learning a bunch of lessons, I think is going to guide us to make some maybe more strategic decisions as we grow in the future.
You
Yeah.
said that you'd had some good advice to pull back. Like, who was it that was giving you the advice at that time?
So we work with, I guess, like a financial advisory firm, but I and Jason were also working with a management consultant,
Mm.
and you know, you don't
A
really want
management consultant as opposed to a business coach, or same.
I guess sort of same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I think they're the ones who will, have the tough conversations with you. I think you can be like living high and not wanting to really reconcile that revenue's dropping and costs are still skyrocketing. But then you can sit down with a business coach or advisor, and they can say, well, this is what the next 6 months look like if you don't start making decisions today.
Yeah.
And then I think that's when we had to make those tough decisions, and we made them early enough that we were able to retain enough cash and enough runway to get through. And I think without that, we might have not been experienced enough, or perhaps not willing enough to make some of those tough decisions.
Yeah, I think we were really fortunate. I remember distinctly the day we sat down for a meeting and we were kind of going through the numbers and going through it on the whiteboard. And I remember going into that meeting knowing that we were going to have to make some tough decisions, but I probably was planning on making 30 to 40% of the decision. And then when having it, someone who we were fortunate as well that his background is in law previously as well. So he was advising us not just on what it meant for our business, but personally as directors, what type of liabilities were we looking at by maybe crossing our fingers and thinking we'll just be able to put the hard work in and we'll make the ends meet. And yeah, by the time we walked out of that meeting, we kind of had a really solid plan of what we were going to do. But, personally and professionally, a bit of a devastating plan as well, like we had to basically have a day where we cut deep, but the advice was do it once, and get it done. And that was obviously an awful day, much more awful for the team members that we had to let go, obviously, than us. But it's one of those things that I think, the sides of entrepreneurship that don't get talked about, sitting in a room. I think I probably spent about 4 hours in a room, letting go of the better part of 7 people, I think, one after another. Not a great experience.
How did that impact you guys, like in the weeks after, like from an emotional standpoint? Like, that would have been tough.
Yeah, it was, but we had a lot of work to do. So it was tough, but the flip side of it is we still had 10 to 15 people who had mortgages to pay, kids to feed, rent. We wanted to make sure that for the people that we kept on, that there was a business and a job for them still here.
Totally. Like, at the end of the day, you've got to look after the greater good, and it impacts a few people, but you've got to think about looking after the rest of the team as well.
Yeah, and I think that's what it really means to be an owner or a director, right? Is taking on that responsibility, and being the one to make those hard choices, and then know that it is for the greater good. Ultimately, it might not feel like it at the time.
Yeah.
How did that event change your leadership style? Like, I imagine the way you lead your teams now has probably changed after that period.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that I think we were very lucky, Brendan talked earlier about his love for processes and spreadsheeting and things. I think we were very fortunate that Brendan is quite passionate about that element of business management, because something that he really pressured me at the time as the head of operations to work on was forecasting for resource. And so we have a very tight system of looking at our forecasts, our booked revenue. We import our deals, their value and the likelihood to close. We attribute that forward looking, and we are actually very strategic about saying, how much design work is in the pipeline and how many designers do we have? And does this make sense 2 months, 3 months, 4 months from now? Do we need to start recruiting today or whatnot? And I think we were doing that at the time because we wanted to make sure that we could recruit effectively. And what we probably didn't realize was actually a big saving grace for us was that it allowed us to plan the other way too. What happens if we experience a lot of churn? At exactly what dates do these current contracts drop off? And if we're not hitting our renewals or new projects, how could those two things come to a head for the existing resource we had? And while before we were doing it as a bit of an exercise, maybe once a month or twice a month, to say how good are we looking for recruitment in the next 2 to 3 months, it's now an exercise that Brendan and I probably do weekly to keep an eye on the future and say, is the pipeline full enough for next quarter? How are we doing enough? What do our renewals look like next quarter? If there's a low amount of renewals next quarter, well, what are we doing today to make sure that we're going to have the new business pipeline to fill that up? I think those things changed that trickle down is what we rely on to give us confidence to then go to the team and say, this is what we're going to be doing for recruitment. This is how we're going to plan. For Brendan and I to talk about promotions and pay rises and things like that, we can factor all that in ahead of time. And that allows us to talk to our team with confidence, which is obviously the thing that then gives them confidence in us as leaders.
So does that, so that transparency, is that what allows you to keep them motivated and working towards, let's say, your North Star or goal? What is it? How do you share that North Star of the business with the individuals?
Yeah, I think so. I guess any professional services, but particularly ours, there's always the push and pull of workload and resources. So I think communicating with the team, knowing that, as a designer, as a strategist, a developer, or a copywriter, things are going to get busy, right? But we need them to get busy so we can then backfill and recruit. So getting buy-in from the team to sort of go through these phases of as work picks up, you become quite busy and everyone is doing like long hours and working quite hard. But that gives us then the latitude to recruit. And then recruit means growing the team. That means then sort of the workload is evenly distributed a bit more. You have a bit more personal time and training time and professional development time. And then as we build up more clients and build up the sales, we then go again, the whole team gets busy again. And to the point where we need to recruit. And then again, the workload is distributed again. So it's communicating the phasing of work with the team and having them trust us that we're not just, working them hard for more and more profits, but it's actually a strategic decision so that, we're not over hiring and we're not under hiring.
Got it. And what was the question? Okay, so that answers like almost the scaling component of it as well, so they can see that journey.
Yeah.
So the individuals can see, okay, this is what it's going to look like. But what is that greater picture that they're working towards? Like you said not just for money, but what is that? Is there something else what is the end benefit for them other than sometimes being busy and sometimes not being busy?
I think it creates career opportunities, right? Like if the business isn't growing, our agency isn't growing, then there's a fairly hard ceiling for your career trajectory. Right? There's only so many roles, and yeah, some people move on, and that opens up vacancies for people to take more senior roles. But really, opportunities come from growth. So we want to continue to grow the agency, because that's what we like doing. That's what the shareholders want. But also it creates opportunity. If you're moving in from a mid to a senior role, and then you want to take a head of department or maybe a director role at some point, you need your department to grow. You need your headcount to grow. You need the organization as a whole to grow. So I guess that's our North Star, is to grow to a point where as all of the driven people in the company have the opportunities and career path that they so desire.
Awesome. And changing tack a tiny bit, AI, massive in the last couple of years, and I'm sure Klaviyo is building into their platform. But what are you guys seeing in terms of optimizing your operations, or are you using it much in changing the way you deliver your services?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, Klaviyo, our primary partner and tool, is seeing incredible AI growth for the customers, but that also helps us as an agency too, right? Like there is a fear that AI will take our job as an agency or professional services, but it's actually enabling us to get out of the rudimentary work and get into some more of the human or some more of the sophisticated consultancy work. So it's really interesting on that side. But also, I guess internally in an agency, what comes to mind is probably copywriting. There's a point where you would have to have a ton of experience, and you would need a certain amount of time. But with AI, you can ideate and iterate quite quickly. You can enter a bunch of parameters from the client's requirements, and whilst the AI isn't doing the final output, it is drastically speeding up the workflow, which then comes to internal efficiencies or even ultimately cheaper pricing for our clients. On the operations side, I'd probably see for us one of the big changes is documentation. There's an incredible amount of internal process and documentation, and AI can not only help us write that and keep it up to date quickly, because as an agency, you want as many of your hours as billable hours to the client, not internal admin hours. So the more we can spend working with our clients and making money, the better. But then there's another really interesting thing that's happening for a business like ours, who have been around for at least 10 years, that we have a tremendous amount of strategies that have proven very lucrative and successful. We have tons of sales proposals that have won or lost, and when you start to feed that information in, you can get really interesting insights on what pitches work and what strategies work, and how you can then start generating those a lot quicker based on our own data.
Yeah, that's amazing. Jason, if you were to give other business owners one piece of advice on their journey growing and scaling a business, what would that one piece of knowledge be that you would share?
I think when it comes to scaling, I'd definitely say on the finance side, like, if you use a consultant and maybe an external bookkeeper who's built you a forecast and some sort of spreadsheet, and you sort of rely on them to keep you up to date with what it means and how it works and where things are landing, I would say to make it a priority to understand that sheet entirely, and probably set yourself the goal of ultimately owning the sheet yourself and managing it and maintaining it yourself, so that you can get advice based on the numbers in it, but not rely on someone else. Because at the end of the day, you're a client of that person, but that forecast is your business, much more your business than anything else. And so if someone else owns it and checks it occasionally for you, you're putting your entire business in the hands of someone else. And I can't tell you the amount of times that I'm fortunate that Brendan likes managing the forecast and being confident with that document, but the number of times Brendan has picked up on a mistake that could have potentially been catastrophic to our planning, because a formula wasn't done right or something wasn't entered in the right spot. However you're managing your forecasts, just become the master of it, is what I would say.
Awesome. I couldn't have said that better myself. So, and Brendan, if there was a single resource, be it a book, a podcast, or a mentor that's been a game changer, what would that single resource be?
Good question. So it's an old one, but it's a good one. It's an oldie, but it's a goodie. Is a book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And it is like an internet startup book, but I think more about it is that this business, be it agency or any other business, is hard, and there's always going to be challenges, and it is hard work. And I think what it taught me, and I think everybody should read that book, is to develop grit. Work is hard. You will get through it. There are good times and there are bad times, but getting through it and surviving is what's key.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Like there's the highs, there's the lows. Knowing that you're connected to that, you've got an end goal, and you need to work through it, because there will always be hard times, no matter what.
Exactly. Yeah.
Boys, thank you very much for your time. If people wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Website. You can jump on and if you want to make an inquiry, you can do that there. Otherwise, Brendan and I are both on LinkedIn. Anzen.co, I should say, is the website. That's ANDZEN. And Brendan and I are both on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or would like to chat.
Thank you
very much. Email, right?
If you want an email. Yeah.
So have a great day, guys.
Thanks, Tristan.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning into The Growth Equation. If you've enjoyed the show, hit that subscribe button and leave a review. It helps us big time. Catch you next time. And if you want more, head over to evolvetogrow.com.au for show notes and exclusive content.